The moon is the closest body to Earth and has the most direct influence. One of its chief influences on the physical world is causing predictable rising and falling in sea levels, known as the tides. Each night, as the sun sets, the waters of the oceans push further onto land, and when the sun rises again, they recede. During a full and new moon, when the Earth aligns between the moon and the sun, the gravitational forces of both the sun and the moon combine, causing high tides to be higher and low tides lower. Just as the moon and sun affect the waters of our planet, so too does it affect us, as we are like water, moved and formed by forces we do not understand. It is our destiny to move beyond the influence of the moon and the other planets. This is the process of learning, and more importantly, unlearning. This is visually represented as the ascension up the tree of life, to break the bounds of gravity and to choose the manner of movement we wish to take. As Quo said, as each planetary influence enters the energy web of your sphere, those upon the sphere are moved, much as the moon which moves about your sphere moves the waters upon your deeps. Your own nature is water, in that you, as mind-body-spirit complexes, are easily impressed and moved. Indeed, this is the very fiber and nature of your journey in this density, to not only be moved, but to instruct yourself as to the preferred manner of your movement in mind, body, and spirit. In our last video, we discussed Malkuth, where the outpourings of the One Infinite Creator manifest and those returning to the One begin their journey home. The manifestations from the higher realms can come about as suddenly as a lightning flash, and where the lightning strikes is in Malkuth. Where it is formed happens in the first group of 3 Sephiroth on the tree, the Astral Triangle, consisting of Yesod, Hod, and Netzach. The interaction of these spheres is what allows the higher to take a form and manifest into the lower, and the lower to understand the higher, allowing for ascension up the tree. This group of spheres is also known as Yetzirah, or the formative world. Let's begin first with the last sphere of the formative world, Yesod, the foundation sphere. Yesod is commonly associated with the lower astral plane. It is, as the author Robert Wang writes, the realm of images cast off by mankind, bright and dark, and is the raw material from which visual images are built on the astral plane. Yesod is the sphere of illusion. This is because, according to occultist Ion Fortune, it reflects the ether of the earth sphere and corresponds in the microcosm to the unconscious of the psychologist, filled with ancient and forgotten things repressed since the childhood of the race. In terms of a physical metaphor, Yesod is strongly associated with the moon. In occult traditions, the moon is extremely important, being that sphere that is involved in manifestation. It is a body that has the power to lift the veil, allowing energies through. This is why there are invoking and banishing rituals designed for both the full and new moons. The cycle of a full moon can assist in banishing unwanted energies, while the new moon can assist in manifesting wanted energies. The moon does not generate its own light and acts as a receptacle for the light of the sun, the planets, and the cosmos. And just like the moon, Yesod acts as a receptacle for the emanations of all of the Sephiroth. As the occultist Israeli Regardi writes, Yesod, the spear of Luna, on the tree of life is placed immediately under Tiphareth, the spear of the sun, thus reflecting the creative forces from above. We can imagine Yesod within ourselves as the lower consciousness, not lower as in bad, but lower as in the waking consciousness that we all inhabit. However, like the moon, our lower consciousness does not generate its own light. It is a reflection of the light emanating from the higher self. Thus, the lower self is susceptible to illusions and the chimeras cast by the shadows of the moon. The middle pillar on the tree of life represents consciousness, and located on the bottom of the pillar is Yesod, which again is the lower consciousness, most easily accessed by everyone. Above Yesod is Tiphareth, which represents the higher self. Yesod, Being below Tiphereth is actually the lower consciousness of the higher self, which is itself the lower consciousness of the one infinite creator, or the sun behind the sun. The journey upwards towards the sun, or Tiphereth, requires first being able to navigate the chimeras of the mind located in Yesod. The movement of the moon regulates the ebb and the flow of etheric energy on Earth, much like its movement affects the ebb and flow of the tides. It is used symbolically to represent the unconscious and the element of water, as the moon moves the water of the earth as well as the waters of the mind. Water, or etheric energy, is formless. It remains formless until given direction and responds and molds itself accordingly. It acts as a scaffolding of the universe, being the energy that provides the interface between the physical and the ethereal. The Greek philosopher Thales described water as the primal principle or element upon which the earth floats like a ship. However, the moon itself isn't water, it is what moves the water. Thus, Yesod itself represents the quality of air. Air is the medium that connects the physical with the divine and is associated with the mind and intelligence. Yesod represents the etheric body, commonly referred to as the indigo body. Ra refers to the indigo body as the form-making body, as this is the part of ourselves responsible for informing the physical. Yesod acts as scaffolding, directly supporting Malkuth. Changes to the scaffolding directly affect the physical. Thus, our etheric body is directly responsible for life itself. While Yesod and the etheric impress themselves upon us, we too impress ourselves upon Yesod. Thought creates reality, and it is through the interaction of the spheres within the Astral Triangle, those of Yesod, Hod, and Netzach, that the formless thought can transform into formed reality. Taking Yesod into the microcosm, we can imagine ourselves, from birth, taking on the impressions of our environment. These impressions form within ourselves imbalances, disorders, thought forms, etc., which have an effect upon us until we consciously balance them. This process isn't limited to childhood, but happens throughout our life. Our environment is constantly impressing itself upon us, and likewise, we impress ourselves upon our environment. Collectively, we impress upon the earth and also the astral world. Visiting the lower astral, you'll find it is full of the stuff of humanity, the dreams, fears, hopes, desires, likes, emotions, etc. Each of us absorbs impressions into our consciousness, where they are either processed immediately or stored in the unconscious. These stored impressions can later emerge as the sources of our desires, thoughts, actions, and more. The interaction of Yesod, Hod, and Netzach forms the lower personality of the individual, and Yesod is the intelligence, which is the foundation of the lower personality. Etheric energy is generative, thus Yesod is also associated with the generative organs and is strongly associated with sex. The element of air is used in a similar fashion to how Qi is employed in Chinese esotericism and Kundalini in yogic practices. Kundalini is often described as being coiled in Yesod, indicating its foundational role in mystical and spiritual systems. Robert Wang, in his book The Kabbalistic Tarot, discusses the association of Yesod with sexual energy. This force is sexual, and it is seen in the microcosm that Yesod covers the generative organs. Those who excite this force through meditation, prayer, sexual stimulation, or ritual methods do so precisely using the same mental mechanisms. It has been said that God is sex, and records of ecstatic union made by those as Saint Teresa are highly erotic. With the astral light of Yesod, the sexual forces are directed consciously and circulated throughout the body, as in the Kabbalistic exercise of the middle pillar. The effect can be overwhelming. The astral light has often been described as an electrical or magnetic current. Indeed, as one brings down the light, the effect is of one's body being highly charged. Yet this is an energy which is plastic, it is mentally malleable. Not only can it be circulated throughout the body or projected in certain spiritual operations, but it is the raw material from which visual images are built on the astral plane. This is one reason why sex is very powerful, especially when used magically. it is directly linked to the raw material of the astral plane, embodying the generative power of Yesod. This topic is much too vast and advanced to explore in this video, and it is worth meditating on this yourself to come to your own understandings. The universe consists of form, force, and equilibrium. Without form, force is just chaos, and without force, form is lifeless. Force requires form, and form requires force. Life moves due to the interaction between form and force, and the way force and form interact is through the equilibrating function of consciousness. In the macrocosm, this manifests as the formation of galaxies, stars, and star systems, planets, and so on. In the microcosm, this manifests as the stuff of our lives, growth, evolution, learning, and so forth. At its essence, life is the interaction between force and form. On the tree of life, Hod is located on the pillar representing form, called the pillar of severity or pillar of form. Form has limits. Thus, the pillar of form is considered negative or receptive. Hod translates to splendor in Hebrew, a term derived from a Latin word meaning to shine. In Hod, the splendor of the One is revealed in nature. One can look upon a tree and see the universe in all its splendor. Nature appears to quite literally shine from the radiance of the One. It is not a physical light, however. It is the negative light of Ein Sof radiating behind a limited form. The splendor of the One is seen as an inner light or shimmering brilliance. This negative light is the key characteristic of Hod as light informs. This is the sphere that informs the formless. In this sphere, we see the true nature of form revealed, and the archetypal energies present behind the form are more easily accessible. It is here where the all in all things, as a German alchemist Basil Valentine wrote, can be found. In Hod, the archetypal frameworks coming from the logos find a form to take. Consider the traditional form that angels are believed to take. Angels are viewed as higher, benevolent beings, each embodying an aspect of the logos and governing a particular facet of reality. They reside in higher spiritual realms, and when perceived by humans, they often appear in forms that are familiar to us, shaped by our collective unconscious. Commonly, these forms include winged beings, typically male and sometimes female. For instance, the entity known as Gabriel might appear differently in various cultures, yet the fundamental essence of the angel remains consistent. The form and names associated with angels provide a useful framework from which we can call upon. Angels represent archetypal energies manifested as forms of intelligence. They don't possess physical forms as we understand them. It is suggested that if angels do have a true form, it will be geometrical in nature. However, geometric shapes are abstract and challenging to reconcile with the concept of an intelligent being that interacts with us. Through Hod, an appropriate vehicle is chosen, and thus archetypal intelligences don them when interacting with us. Throughout humanity's history, we have conceived of various gods and goddesses, the majority of which are now either lost to history or relegated to myths and history books. However, perhaps the gods of old were indeed real archetypal forces, just taking on different forms. The author Denning and Phillips, in their book The Sword and the Serpent, write that, just as man covered the walls of his caves with pictures and began shaping fragments of bone or of rock into figurines, so he began to fill the delicate astral world about him with shapes of dominant force. Great bison to command the bison, great bears to command the bears, men to befriend him or to give commands in his name, and the woman who was mother and bride and daughter. Man's understanding became greater, deduction fortified intuition. He imagined gods for himself, and those images too walked the astral. Given enough focus and attention, the imaginings of the mind can indeed become real in the astral. Denning and Phillips also write that those forms created by man, which are of sufficient strength and sufficient separodic purity, became real channels. If the forms created by man resonate with higher, more pure energies, they can become appropriate forms for the energies to take when interacting with us. This would explain the seemingly related natures of various gods found in different cultures. The higher energy is the same, the form is different, however. Thus, when interacting with angels, you are interacting with very real archetypal intelligences, the image of which is generally formed from the collective understanding of what an angel is, however. Forms are transient. They change depending on the culture. For instance, Gabriel has associations with Isis of ancient Egypt and Selena of ancient Greece. The deities of this culture, which we associate in our present age with the name Gabriel, are the exact same being, clothed in different form. You can see the dynamic between the human imagination and archetypal concepts coming from the higher planes. The archetypes are truth, the imagination is false. Yet when the imaginings of the mind are clothed in archetypal truths, they find a footing in this dense realm. While Yesod is associated with air, Hod is associated with water. Alchemists call water the root of all minerals, and that the universe and all that it contains comes from the waters. Water is fluid. It has no inherent form until it is shaped by something. It is receptive and representative of the feminine. The Sefer Yetzirah describes Hod in Netzach as the spear of prophecy and inspiration, and indeed, Hod can be seen as a prophetic spear in the sense of unveiling the formless potential and guiding it into manifestation through divine illumination. Hod deals with the comprehension and articulation of the divine, acting as a realm where abstract concepts are understood. Thus, Hod is form, and its counterpart, force, is the spear of Netzach, where one can find the fire that brings the form to life. Netzach is located on the bottom of the right pillar of the Tree of Life, called the Pillar of Mercy. This is the pillar representative of force or action. Netzach represents, at its core, the abstract beginnings of concretized form, where Hod can be seen as a spear where archetypal forces don their form, which are created by resonant imaginings from the will of our imagination. Netzach is the intuitive inklings of feeling, which allows those sensitive to comprehend the archetypal energies which make the form. To put it another way, you can think of Hod as the spear of the magician or the scientist, and Netzach as the spear of the mystic, the artist, or the shaman. One is more ordered, almost scientific and rational, and the other much more abstract, feeling-based, intuitive. The Pillar of Mercy is considered masculine, and the Pillar of Form feminine. This may seem contradictory to what we commonly understand as feminine and masculine, or receptive and active. After all, we typically associate the intuition with feminine qualities. It is helpful when studying the Qabalah to disregard the societal expectations of men and women. We are all masculine and feminine in composition, and these terms are not the same as the terms we use to describe the societal roles for men and women. The Pillar of Form is considered feminine because it represents the higher feminine concept of embodying form, giving form to the formless, while the Pillar of Mercy represents the concept of active force. The force requires a form to be understood, otherwise it is chaotic, and likewise the form requires a force in order to have life. Thus, the Sephiroth on the Pillar of Form create limits, which provide a way for force to manifest. Diane Fortune writes this about Hod: the keys that unlock the doors of the treasure house of images and enable us to command its denizens are to be found in Hod, the spear of magic. It is truly said in the mysteries that no degree becomes functional until one has taken the next. Anyone who tries to function as a magician in Yesod soon learns his error, for although he can perceive the images in the treasure house, he has no word of power with which to command them. In ritual magic, simply reciting words and performing motions is ineffective. One must also invoke feeling. Therefore, Hod and Netzach work together, and the synthesis of these two, formed in Yesod, is what can be channeled through to the mind. Ritual magic is performed in order to elicit a result in the real world. The result can come about only by the synthesis of Hod and Netzach, managed by the will of the magician. For example, in planetary magic, the magician may petition the energies of the planet Mercury for assistance in some task related to communication or intellect. Depending on the ritual, the magician may write the petition on a certain colored paper with a colored candle and a certain type of gem or incense. This is all in an effort to get the mind to focus on the resonant energies of that particular planet. In other words, to get the mind of the magician in the proper state in order to channel the energies of Mercury. The rituals can seem unnecessary, however, they are useful to create resonant forms which are compatible with the energies the magician wishes to invoke. If the magician were to simply ask the planet Mercury without any resonant image in mind, it is likely their petition would go unanswered, as the resonant energies of Mercury would have no footing upon which to ground in our reality. Of course, after a certain stage of development, ritual does not need to occur, as one can simply ask, or rather direct their will towards those resonant energies, and they will respond without the focusing assistance of rituals. Perhaps this is one reason why Netzach means victory in Hebrew. The root word of victory is a Latin word victus, or victoria, which means to conquer. Ra describes the nature of the unconscious as being one of concept rather than word. They say, the nature of the unconscious is of the nature of concept rather than word. Consequently, before the veiling, the use of the deeper mind was that of the use of unspoken concept. To get to the concept requires the word. However, to transcend the word means one has direct access behind the veil. They have achieved victory over matter by gaining a direct line to the higher. The relationship between Hod and Netzach can be seen as a gateway of sorts to the higher spheres. Without being able to follow the intuition and clothe it in rational forms, one cannot gain a strong enough footing to stand in the higher. This brings to mind Ra speaking about the progress of adepts. They say, few there are which are successful in grasping the light of the sun. By far, the majority of adepts remain groping in the moonlight, and, as we have said, this light can deceive as well as uncover hidden mystery. Perhaps this explains Netzach's association with the element of fire. Fire is a creative force, however, it is also destructive. In ancient Egypt, the scorpion was used as a symbol representing both wisdom and deceit, and was considered a guardian of the gateway of the sun, for the fire which the scorpion controls is capable of illuminating as well as consuming. Those who can pass the fire trial can achieve victory and thus can stand reborn and ready to handle the higher spheres. The challenges posed by Netzach's fiery energy are essential. They test the adept's resolve and purity of intention. Just as fire refines gold by burning away all impurities, so too must the adept be purified of personal illusions and attachments to access the higher spiritual realities. This purification process, emblematic of passing through Netzach's fire, is what prepares the adept to approach the higher spheres, not just intellectually, but with a refined soul, capable of comprehending and embodying higher spiritual truths. Thus, the combined forces of Hod and Netzach serve as a crucial gateway beyond the deceptive allure of the moonlight, reaching towards the clarity and brilliance of the sun in Tiphereth.